If fortunate, one becomes a trailblazer. We live in such a whisper of time, John McPhee. And one I wrote myself, life moves through time like a fleeting shadow.
To take home a copy of her resume, you're going to need help carrying it. Hi, I'm Billy King, and I'm talking about the accomplishments of a true artistic treasure, photographer Mary Randlett. Whether you know it or not, you've seen her photographs in 40 permanent collections, including the Metropolitan Museum, the Smithsonian, the Seattle Art Museum, and the Henry. She's best known for documenting our region's creative forces. Writers, poets, visual artists, and architects all stopped in time while engaged in their life work. She is currently preparing for the release of a new nature book, but Mary was willing to momentarily put down her camera and talk to our cameras. It's a rare glimpse of her talent and the attitude of a woman whose only complaint is there aren't enough hours in the day.
You taking pictures? Okay, well that's fine.
Great, right there.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Well, let's look
Is that
at
all
her.
right?
Yeah, that's perfect.
What am I supposed to talk about?
Well, I'm gonna.
That's great. What do you think so?
Closer.
You can come in a little bit closer,
Can we come in a little
just
bit?
a speck. I've always preferred to be behind the camera. My camera is my security blanket, I think. I can go up elevators, climb out tops of roofs, anywhere with I have a camera. Up at grain elevators, you name it. But I could never do it without it. I'm in love with my photography, and especially nature, and it's like a cocoon around me. Other people have problems, they have to go get their head shrink. I can just crawl right back in my work, and it protects me. Morris Graves, painter. Ruth Kirk, writer. Imogen Cunningham, one of the great early photographers. Henry Miller, writer. William Cumming, early painter. John Logan, poet. Bagley Wright, patron of the arts. Jerry Tsutakawa, sculptor. Tony Angel, sculptor. With photographing people, to me, it's always been a total intrusion. I mean, I'm scared to death every time I have to go photograph a person. But once I get into it, I'm usually fine. Most of these people are artists and writers. And when I came into this room at the opening night and hadn't seen it hung, I was almost overwhelmed completely to think of all these great lives that I've walked into. They gave me the richness of their life and their worlds, because I came into these places absolutely cold, most of them. I started with Graves and Toby back in 1949, and they were friends of Mother's. And then I documented Morris because he lived right near where I was living in Woodway Park. I had photographed Morris before, and this time I just followed him around. I was documenting the house that he was building, and he sat down on one of his beautiful tables in the fall with all the falling leaves and had a cup of tea. Everything he did was beautiful. If you keep them in their own environment, they're absolutely natural, which is what I wanted. This is a picture of Bill Cumming. This was the first time I photographed Bill. He put his suit on and got dressed, and I said, well, what are you doing that for? Because we were going up to the Avenue, and then we went to the Henry Gallery where I wanted to photograph him. And he said, don't want to look like the rest of the bums out there. This was during the hippie days in the 60s, and I had to laugh about that. But he's a great person. Tried to turn us into communists when he used to visit at Bainbridge. In these pictures, There aren't any family pictures. Oh yes, there are. My mother's in here. Forgot about her. Well, my mother was a major influence in my life and my work. I was very fortunate. I spent every single summer at Bainbridge Island from the time I was 2 months old. And so I grew up in nature, and I really wasn't that interested in art. But Mother, in the meantime, after about 1940, was back east at Willard Gallery, selling pictures, showing Toby's work to Jackson Pollock before he ever painted the way he did. Then she went on, was down in San Francisco as curator of art at San Francisco Museum of Art, and showed, I think, gave Imogen Cunningham one of her first retrospectives. So she had a great background, and she always encouraged me. Once I started taking pictures, then I had a wonderful rapport with her. And then she introduced me. We had a lot of the artists around. Betty Bowen I met, and she was a good friend of my mother's. And she was a real catalyst and got all of us artists together. She was working for Dr. Fuller up at the Seattle Art Museum. There was a magazine called Seattle, which David Brewster, I think, had something to do with. And they wanted a picture of Betty. I'd already photographed her in her car because she had this Jag. So she brought it out to Edmonds. We drove it up on the beach, and I took this great picture of her. This picture is very close to the painting behind him, and it's Jacob Lawrence. He painted a self-portrait, which is now in the collection of the Seattle Art Museum, and it's right behind him, and it was done right on this staircase. It was the attic of his house, and that's where he used to work. He was always pure joy to be with. The first job I had to get was at the Bon Marché in Seattle, so I had to commute from Edmonds. And I was selling sporting goods, and after about 1 month, I realized that the guys in there were getting paid more than I was, but I was selling more. So I asked for a raise, and the boss fired me right there. That was the happiest day of my life, and that's when I decided all I wanted to do was become a photographer. I knew I needed an apprenticeship, even though I had been printing pictures, and I found Hans Jorgensen, who had moved from the East Coast and had been an assistant to Louise Dulwolf, the great Harper's fashion photographer, before the war. And he was just starting up to do commercial work, and he said that I could work with him, but he also showed me the twin lens Rolleiflex. And that was the beginning of everything, a whole new world. Okay, I'm dodging. I'm letting more light in on this water because it was so white, full of foam. This was out at La Push. Well, that's a fairly good print. I gave one a little bit less light, and I think that's the one. I'm not sure. When they dry, they always look a little bit darker, but this is the foam breaking onto the shore. But the magic part, which I'm sure I didn't see, was that it becomes the form of a bird going out to sea again. So I just call it Bird of the Sea. And this is the area which I burned in. And this just a little bit. Now you can see right through these things. So I was given a gift beyond what I thought I was seeing. So one thing led to another. Then I wrote probably about 6 or 7 artists. This is in 1963. All the children were in school, and said I'd like to photograph them in their own homes. And then I was petrified. They'd say yes, and if they said yes, then I had to face up, and if they said no, that was the end of it. But each artist has given me wonderful eyes to see. So all my life, all my work is just formed naturally. It was never forced. That doesn't mean I didn't have to work. But I've always lived on the edge, and I think that's what taking pictures is anyway. And I had a real responsibility later on when the books started coming out with these artists. The Museum of Northwest Art was formed. They would want pictures, other people want pictures, and I've had a lot of the younger generation say, well, you should charge more, but I've had a real obligation to give these pictures to these institutions and let them pay me what they can, because it furthers the education of the people. Okay. You want me to kind of say what's going on around here? Junk all over. Some of these are really important. I'm right in the middle of doing a huge task of getting together 134 prints, mounted and signed, dated, for the University of Washington Special Collections. And they bought my whole collection. And that's why they're all over the place. And it's almost mind-boggling. It's the second time I've had to do it. So they already have the first 134. So I came across all these at the gasworks, which I've always loved, and I photographed it from the very beginning before it was ever Gasworks Park. Right here is the old gasworks. I did that in about 1969. That's before it was ever developed into a park. And then in 1970 was the old gasworks, taken from up on the hill. Then Rich Haig received a great honor at Harvard, and one of his works was the gasworks part, the other was Blodell, and I went back in 1996 to rephotograph gasworks, and I found this picture, not realizing I had taken the same picture years before. This was 1970, this one is 1996, and this is the finished gasworks. Then in 1992, I was working on a book, Roger Sale, Seeing Seattle, and he wanted to show the gasworks with the city just muted behind. So I was lucky. I took this picture and it was gone in about 5 minutes because the mist lifted. And then this picture was taken for Rich Haig. Again, it's backlit, and this is an example of my work, which started in 1986, my new way of looking at light and using the sunlight. Black and white is the most abstract of all the forms. And you get so you know what the tensions are. Leo Kenny once told me, black against white makes great tensions. And I think of that every time I start photographing nature. A black tree will give a real tension against a fog background or something. And I take lots of chances too. You know, white against gray sometimes doesn't really show up. But we have very unusual light here, and it's so beautiful. And so now I'm going back to my nature book. That's the work that I'm totally happy with. Totally, it nurtures me whenever I'm in nature, and I can be the screaming Mimis, but a lot of things, and I can get in my car and I get on a back roads. That's when I'm the happiest, because I'm looking at the road, looking at both sides. I'm looking in the rearview mirror to see if there are any cops around. Then you're always looking for a place to pull over. Okay, we're going to go up that way. I need beauty. I need it more and more, because the earth, this place is getting uglier and uglier with all the cars and the people and the George Bush and a few other little things. Going down to see this falling water. I think today I'm seeing more. Everywhere I look, I see pictures, especially in nature. When I first started, I might see 4 or 5 in a year. Now, everywhere I look, and I don't care what it is, water in the pools, trees, bare trees, landscape, everything. I always look, but now, no matter where I look, I see pictures. I mean, it's fantastic. The need for beauty is the major thing that people create art, most people that I know anyway, to create something really beautiful. And I look for it all the time, and I find it in people, I find it in books, I find it everywhere. I'm interested in everything that goes on. I'll read a paper, New York Times. I'm not interested in the murders and all this horrible thing that goes on. I'm interested in the sciences, what's going on, nature, the Arctic, the ice is shrinking. I'm interested in all these wonderful things. You have to have this push to go. And there are times when you're scared spitless, taking pictures. Things go wrong, and you just grit your teeth and keep going. It's too bad that branch is up there. It would have been a great thing without it. You know, the whole thing is just kind of like a cathedral.